Manchester, music is predominantly pop, but always with a bit of a Bollywood and African twist, and singing classically and opera and some bits to its drum line. So yeah, it's nice to see you soon.
Hi, I'm Ellen Hobby. I make wonky, soul-infused pop. That's the tagline. Just released my debut single. My debut album is coming out in May. Yeah, I'm from Manchester.
And we're going to talk to Ellen in a bit about her experience on the live side, and particularly focusing in on a headline show that she staged and how that all went. We've also got a couple of great guests. This whole session is, well, actually, the first part of this session is all Chris's. So if you're asking any questions of me or my two guests, just say Chris and you'll probably be right. So we'll get our two guests up on stage very shortly. But before that, I just want to do a very quick overview. Let's stand just over here. So for each of our sessions, I have a very quick, speedy CMU guide to the side of the industry we're talking about. So in the first hour, we were talking about rights, and it took me 45 minutes to explain how copyright works. The good news is the life side of the business is a lot easier to understand. So I think I can get through my slides in about 5-10 minutes, and then we'll get our two guests up for 10-15 minutes, and then we'll talk to Ellen about her show. But let's just do the CMU guide to making money for live music. And I guess, let's state the bleeding obvious, that from an artist perspective, the key revenue stream on the live side is ticket money. So, you know, if people are willing to pay, be in the room while you're performing your music, we can make money out of live performance. And on one level, it's as simple as that. And as an artist, you might actually be putting on the show yourself, in which case you take the money that you sell tickets, the box office money, in essence. There might be a promoter involved, but you might be working on a box office split basis. So we split the box office 70-30, whatever the agreement is. You might be paid a set fee, particularly if you're doing a support slot or if you're playing a festival. Or it might be a guarantee, which is a bit of, you know, a guaranteed chunk of money and then a box office split if the box office is higher. But in all of those scenarios, the money you're getting, whether it's a split of the box office or it's a guarantee or a fee, is basically based on how much money you can bring in at the box office. So from an artist perspective, the ticket money is really important. But it's not the only revenue stream for artists out of their live shows, because we can also sell merchandise at our live shows. So we can make money on the merch store. Plus, if you are performing your own songs, look at that, we're already back at copyright, because that is a performance of your songs, and therefore a license is required for that performance, and that, as I mentioned earlier, will be separate to whatever fee or split of the box office you are receiving. So as an artist, there are three different key revenue streams on the live side: ticket money, merch stall, song royalties. Technically, the merch stall and song royalties, those are actually intellectual property revenue streams, because the song is your copyright, and actually merchandise is also intellectual property, because there's copyright in visuals and photographs and illustrations and artwork. Then you might be able to protect your brand through a thing called trademark, we don't have time to go into today. So those are all IP revenue streams, but of course the show gives you the opportunity to sell merchandise and the opportunity to perform the music. So the live side is bringing those three different revenue streams. The reason why, as an artist, it's important to understand the three different revenues is if you're playing, well, live's a real scale game. If you're playing to 10,000 people a night, you can make an awful lot of money out of live. Okay, the only thing you have to make sure you don't do when you're playing at that level is spend too much on stage. If you have a laser show with 42 dancers and an entire orchestra, then it might be that your money disappears quite quickly. But providing you keep the production costs in check, we can make a lot of money when you're playing to 10,000 people a night. If you're playing to 60 people a night, the profit margin is really tight. Okay, when you're playing those small shows, those of you who do this will know, it's really hard to make money out of those small shows. So that's why these three revenue streams are really important, because there is a relatively high chance, particularly if you're not playing in your hometown, that your fee or share of the box office is not enough. As in, you're still making a loss. So selling as much merch as you can and making sure, assuming you're performing your own songs, you get all of the song royalties. So in the UK, that's your PRS money that's possible to make sure you break even on the show and preferably make a profit. So, from an artist's perspective, ticket money is the primary revenue stream, but merch and royalties from PRS are important too. On the industry side, promoters and venues have multiple revenue streams as well. First of all, the promoter will take a share of the box office. So the promoter is also earning from ticket sales, but there's also, particularly for the venues, food and drink. So actually, if you're running a venue, you make more money selling food and drink than you do anything else. Again, grassroots level in particular, it's all about what you can sell on food and drink. But even at the higher level venues, you're making really good money by selling food and drink. and you sell them food and drink. So, another really important revenue stream. And then for the bigger promoters and the bigger venues, there's also quite a lot of brand money in live. Brands like having their logos above doors, they like having their logos on posters, they like having access to tickets, whether that's tickets they can give away or it's simply access to tickets so that their customers get a 48-hour pre-sale on the show. So brands spend quite a lot of money on live. So on the sort of, the business side of live, yes, there's the ticket money, that's important too, but also what can we sell on food and drink and can we get any brand money in? So those are our revenue streams. I told you it was quite straightforward. Any questions on the revenue streams? One question I sometimes get asked is, can the artist get a cut of any of this money? Maybe I'll ask you guys about whether or not you can be taking any of that. It massively depends and probably not, but we'll see what my guests think on that. Okay, number 3. When we look at an artist's live career, in most cases it's pretty straightforward. In that as an artist, you're working your way up what we call the venue ladder, or the live music ladder. And so slowly but surely you're paying to bigger audiences every night. And as I said, live's an incredibly top-heavy industry. At the upper end, we're making huge amounts of money. At the lower end, we're basically making no money. And then what's happening in the mid-tier? You're probably aware, since the pandemic, the upper end of live, no one needs to worry about the upper end of live. The upper end of live is booming. The grassroots is in crisis, but the grassroots is always in crisis. But what is happening in the middle? And an increasing number of artists and venues in that mid-tier are telling me it's really hard to make any money out of live at the moment because the costs have surged putting on a show, but we don't feel we can double the ticket price. So it's a very top-heavy game. The people at the top make a lot of money. The people at the bottom end really struggle to even break even. And the question is, what can you do in the middle? Because of course, actually, when I say this is the route artists go on, most artists are going to stop somewhere in the middle, aren't they? And that's fine. We can build a solid business and we can put on brilliant shows somewhere in the middle. Only a really small number of artists are ever going to get up to a Reading Stadium level. But how do we ensure that in the middle we're able to bring in money? And then you can sort of counterbalance that with what's happening on the festival stage as you work your way up the lineups at the different festivals. Number 4, artists work with business partners on the live side of their career, just like they do with their rights and the fan relationships. So let's have a look at the key players on the live side. Artists, obviously, is where it all begins. As an artist's career progresses, they get somebody on their team that is specifically focused on their live career. And that's the booking agent. We're going to talk more in a moment about what a booking agent does. But that can, once you're getting some momentum on the live side of your career, you have somebody super focused on what's happening on the live side of what you're doing. Then, of course, we have all the people involved in actually delivering the show. So that could be a single person doing everything, or it could be an entire team of people delivering the show, depending on the scale. Plus, if you have a manager, management get involved to a certain extent in tour management as well. Plus, once decent money's coming in, you might have a lawyer and accountant. The other key people on the live side are the promoters, who are the risk takers on the show. So the promoters book you, they book the venue, they guarantee you a fee or a minimum on the box office, and then you and the promoter together sell the tickets, you do the marketing, but the promoter is ultimately the risk taker. And then the other key players on the live side, obviously the venues, stating the obvious, the venues are really important, but also the ticketing companies. You can almost not make out, it says ticket agent in those green circles. And although we tend to think of the ticketing companies as just being the app on the phone or the website where you go and buy tickets, ticketing companies can also be really important marketing partners because they're sitting on fantastic data, and for promoters, they're useful for getting cash flow. Because as a promoter, I need to get the money up front as soon as I can so I can pay everybody. Legally speaking, the ticket agent shouldn't let you have the money until the show has happened, just in case the show gets cancelled. But that won't work for me as a promoter, so I need my ticket agent to take a risk and pay me that money so I have cash flow. So these are the key players that artists are working with on the live side. And the promoter prime risk taker, some venues are also promoters, obviously. Agents sit between the artist and promoter, we'll talk more about that in a moment. And ticket agents are also important partners. Okay, my final thing before I get my guests up. In terms of building a live career, artists often start off by putting on their own shows. At that early stage, gigging is as much about building a fan base and finding an audience as it is making money, which is just as well, because you're going to struggle to make money. But in order to begin that process, to find an audience, you need to demonstrate that you can put on a good show and you can bring in a few people to watch it. And so a good way of doing that is to put on your own show. So find a venue that will do you a really good deal, usually early in the week, and then what can you do to pull in as many of your friends and your network and your social media followers as possible. But obviously, as an artist, ultimately what you're looking to do is to get booked by other people to play their shows, whether that's a venue or whether it's a promoter, whether it's a festival. You're looking for business partners who basically take the risk on the show and help you with the marketing. So that leads me into my guests, who I'm going to invite. My two Chris's want to join me. Take your seats here. Yeah, round of applause for our guests. Because the focus now is on our key business partners on the live side. What is it that they do? And I guess for those of you who are early on in your career, how can you get the live side of your career going? How can you get opportunities to play? How can you get promoters who want to work with you? How might you get an agent who wants to work with you? What can we do to make that happen? But before I get into my questions, and actually while I get my questions up on my phone, why don't you guys just very quickly introduce yourselves and your businesses? So why don't you go first?
Okay, I'm Chris. One of the Chris's, Chris Wade. I run an agency called Strada Music International. I originally started an agency about 40 years ago called Artist-centric. We then merged with another agency to form Strada. We work with all sorts of artists from all over the world, folk, roots, world, Americana, African, you name it, lots of different styles, bluegrass, blues, bit jazz. And we work with artists from this country, but as I say, from all over the world, and take artists to other countries as well. Work in theatres, art centres, festivals, clubs, all the sorts of types of venues I've just been mentioned.
Fantastic. Another Chris.
Right, I'm Chris Hawken. I run Hey Manchester, which is a live music promoter here in Manchester. Started doing it 19 years ago, so next February is the 20th birthday. I do about 100 shows a year, mostly in Manchester, occasionally in Leeds and Hepton Bridge and some other places. I work largely in folk, Americana and roots, but also do other things which I know about, solo piano acts and done electronic and all sorts over the years. And because I'm independent, I can use whichever venue suits a particular show or a particular act, so that's from tiny little rooms at the backs of pubs up to, I've got a show this year at the Apollo, which is a 3,500 capacity venue, and everywhere in between.
So I think there's three things I want to find out from both of you, which is the role you play when you're working with your artists. Then we'll talk a little bit about how you connect with artists and how artists can get their music in front of you guys. And then we'll talk to the DIY artists about how they might go about finding shows and putting on shows for themselves. But let's start off with your role. So I very quickly said the booking agent sort of sits between the artists and then all those other people in the live industry. So when you're taking an artist on new, what is it that you're doing day to day for the artist once they're on your roster?
Right, well, different agents, or different agencies work in different ways. Actually, some agents, all they'll do is contact a venue, promoter, get a gig, and that's it. And then it's over to you, the artist, to do all the other work, like promoting, marketing yourself, etc. Liaising with the venue, if you need things like accommodation, meals. Other agents do a lot more, and what we do in our agency is we try and make sure that we get all the details for the artist. If it's a tour, for instance, the timings, the routings, if you need hotels, meals, etc. We have a database. We use something called Overture, which is an online database, which means we can keep all our contacts. It's got all our contacts, and all the contracts get issued through this as well. And it issues invoices, which go out to the promoters or the venues or whatever. And if it's a tour, what I tend to do is get as much information as I can for the artist about the arrival times, sound check times, contact details, on the day details. So if you need to contact somebody on the day at the venue, if you're running late or whatever, you've got those details. Where you're going to eat, if you're going to eat, what you're going to eat, where you're going to stay, so all those sort of things. And then we can produce, by pressing a button on our computer, it will produce an itinerary which we can send to you. So it's got, if you've got 12 dates, it'll give you all the details for those dates, which makes life a lot easier for you. If it's just a one-off gig, we don't tend to do the itineraries, but that's what I do. But as I say, not every artist or agent does as much detail, so it varies between agencies. Some do a lot more than others.
And I guess that's really important. So if you start working with agents, it's been really clear how far along this process are you involved? Are you literally doing the deal, negotiating it, and then handing it all over to me? Or will you handle the logistical stuff? Will you advise me on where I route my tour, if I'm touring in France, you know, all that sort of stuff. So it's been really clear what you're getting into.
One thing we do need as well from the artist is all your publicity material. We need to have, well, all the details, your good bio, a brief bio, because a fuller one, which explains what you do as a live show. Good photographs, high-res photographs for brochures, but also suitable for online stuff. All your social media. Social media has become so important in more recent years for artists to promote themselves. So you need to have really good social media, you know, lots of followers on Facebook or Instagram or whatever you do. We need your technical specifications, any riders. I mean, probably when you start out you don't have a rider, but obviously the higher up you get, a lot of artists have quite detailed riders, what they want. You're familiar with what a rider is? Yeah. Okay, so we need all that information. So we need everything, basically, which we can then pass on to the promoter or the venue.
And I guess it's juice like that, isn't it? Because that's helping you pitch the artist to start with, and then once you've got the gig, the first thing the promoter wants is all of that stuff straight away.
So it's a two-way, well, as this Chris was saying, the promoter relies on you, the artist, doing your own, selling the gig yourself, but also they will. So don't just rely on the promoter to sell the gig, you've got to do your bit. And the agent's job is not to do that. We're not there to sell the gig to the audience, we're trying to just sell the gig to the promoter. It's up to you and the promoter to do the rest.
Good segue into the role of the promoter, and I think that immediately comes to a really important point. Because we use the word promoter instead of producer, because in the music industry we can't call you a producer because those are the people in the studio. People sometimes think that means your primary role is to promote, as in sell the show, market the show. And I think most promoters are very keen to say when it comes to marketing, it's very much a joint venture between the artist and promoter. But if you book an artist to play, what is it that you are doing and not doing around the show?
All of the logistics, so that's things like booking the headline artist, booking the support artist, doing a bit of back and forth to work out if it's a local support or a touring support, and if it's one or two acts. Making sure the venue's held in advance, which means you've got a pencil in a diary and then confirming it, and then handling the ticketing once it's all confirmed. So as you mentioned, working with different ticket agencies, I work with 5, so I kind of spread the allocations between 5. Then there's the announcement, the marketing, so both online and offline, so social media, paid advertising, and then print advertising as well, so posters, flyers, programs, whatever you can do.
Did you say that most of what happens actually on stage, that's the artist's responsibility?
Yeah, I've got nothing to do with that. Yeah, I've got, well, if I'm on stage, something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
It's happened like 3 times in 19 years. It's not like there's a fire alarm gone off or something like that. There's no artistry at my end, and I'm fine and happy with that. I'm a logistics person, and ticking the boxes and making everything is done that should be done to promote that show, really.
And I guess those other business partners on my chart, so the venue and the ticket agent, I guess you manage that. Once you're the promoter, those are your relationships on behalf of the artist.
Yeah, so I do all the communicating with the agent, the artist, the manager, possibly the label, definitely the venue, possibly the sound engineer, the print distribution company, everyone. You know, my inbox is very, very busy on a day-to-day basis.
Let's very quickly talk about what's the deal. How do you get paid? So let's start off with the agent, because sometimes the agent side is quite straightforward, although obviously every agency is different, but usually it's a straightforward commission.
Normally we just get a commission, so it's a percentage of the fee that the artist gets in the end. Now, normally it's around about 15%, can vary, sometimes it's a bit less, 10%. If there's an artist that gets a big, very large fee, then, you know, sometimes an agent will take 10% because obviously it's worth more than if it's an artist that's only getting a small fee. We're still doing a lot of work, because quite honestly, sometimes it's more work to get shows for the artists that aren't really well known than it is to get a big name. So you're putting in more work for less money. So
The hope being that in 2 years' time,
yeah,
they'll be doing those bigger shows.
sometimes now we, as an agency now, we're VAT registered. So we have to add on VAT what we charge the artist. So it's normally say 15% plus we have to add VAT on. Now not all agencies are VAT registered. So you know, if you go to an agency that's, you know, a lower, smaller one, maybe they're not VAT registered. So you've got advantage then of not having to pay VAT, but we are VAT registered. So what we do is after the show, we will contact the venue, or they'll get back to us, and they'll pay. The money comes to us to start with. We have what we call a client's account, so it's not our main account. It's an account that is all the money that belongs to the artist. So it goes into any artist's fees go into this separate account.
That's really important when agencies go under.
Yeah.
Which happened quite recently.
Yeah, so basically none of your fees would come into our main account until, once we've got a tour that's finished, we will send the artist a statement which we say, please check this statement. It's got details of all the income that's come in, any expenses that we may have had to pay out on your behalf, which doesn't tend to be a lot normally. If it's overseas artists, we have to, we are able to get what's called a COS, which is like a work permit, and we're able to get those on behalf of the artist, which we have to pay for, so we recharge that to the artist. So at the end of the tour, we would send you a statement, or your manager, or whoever, the statement, and we say, right, please check this, this has got all the fees that we received on your behalf, and this is the commission that we are going to take from that. Let us know that you're happy with that. If you're happy with that, what we do is we'll pay you the fee, everything that you're due, less our commission. That's how we do it, and not every agent does it like that. So sometimes I think some agents are happy for the artist to get paid direct, and then they will invoice the artist for their commission.
Well, I guess two things, really important things I took away from that is that sort of 10 to 15%, that's very much linked to how much work you're doing, isn't it? Is the more work the agent's doing, the more likely they want to be at the 15%. So all these things, the more you get, the more you're probably going to have to give up. That VAT point is really important. It's always remember those little technicalities. Oh, 15%, that's fine. Oh no, hang on a second, you're VAT registered, I'm not VAT registered.
Yeah.
Suddenly there's some extra fees. So it's just making sure all of that is really clear up front.
Yeah, it's 15%, it's VAT on the 15%, not VAT on the whole thing, obviously. Yeah.
In terms of the promoter, how do you get paid? What is usually the deal structure?
That's a good question. So the income is quite straightforward in a way. The only income is ticket money. I don't have a venue. There's no merch that I sell or anything like that. The only income that I've got coming my way is the ticket revenue. And it's worth pointing out that as my company's VAT registered, that means for every ticket that's sold, you lose that amount.
Yeah.
So if I'm selling a £12 ticket, only £10 of that is actually coming to the company. So that's the money coming in, and it'll come in a week after the show from the 5 different ticket agents that I mentioned. So there's a bit of a cash flow thing going on there, which means that you need to have a fairly healthy bank balance at any particular time to make sure everyone can get paid promptly. Going out, everything. I'm responsible for everything, so that's paying the artists, paying the support artists, paying the venue, paying the
And do you usually just pay the artist a straight fee, or is there some sort of box office split arrangement?
Almost always a box office
Yeah.
split.
With a guarantee?
A guarantee,
Yeah.
So let's say there's a guarantee of £500, and then there's either a plus 70% or versus 80% depending on the deal. And that's after.
And that's 7% going to the artist?
Yeah, after the cost.
After cost is the really important point, yes.
Yeah.
So that's been really clear, isn't it? On the artist agent side is, what are the costs that are coming off?
So
Yeah.
It doesn't include a holiday for you to the Bahamas while planning for the show. So it's been really clear what
yeah,
costs
you're
are.
very open and transparent with these costs. So I'll send through a spreadsheet that has those costs listed. So that'll be the venue hire, the engineer, the cost of the posters, the flyers, the online advertising, the PRS, the royalties that you mentioned. coming in, a sell-out situation. So if you sell 200 tickets, this is how much money's coming in. This is what the end result will be. Obviously, if it sells 150, it's a slightly different result. And if it sells 100 and it hasn't broken even, then it's just a guarantee.
Yeah, but crucially, you're taking the hit. So
Yeah.
you are the risk taker in the
Yeah,
room.
there's no guaranteed like profit
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, the artist is getting the guarantee,
Yeah.
even if 5 people show up, but you might not get booked next time.
I can book a really good show that goes really well on the night and can still lose £500.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I can do about that really, apart from do a better deal next time.
Final question. I know you've got to rush off quite soon, so but one final quick question, just a quick answer for you. For the artists who don't have an agent, and maybe artists who are not yet getting booked and they want to put on their own shows, what advice would you have for an artist trying to get their own shows booked? And what advice would you have for an artist who's putting on their own night in essence being a risk taker?
So the artist's trying to get their own show.
So they're trying to find someone to book them, basically.
I mean, if you're, what I would say is if you're successful at getting your own bookings, carry on doing it. But, you know, once you start getting up at a different level, then you might find that you want to use different venues, higher profile venues, further afield. And an agent, the thing with an agency is they've got a big database of venues, you know, of all different sizes. They tend to be working with a lot of people who've got good knowledge of the venues or the promoters, good relationship with them, so they're probably in a better position to get you more shows. So it depends what level you're at, and once you get to a certain level you might find an agent useful, but you've got to, and they'll help you out, they'll do a lot of things for you, depending, as I said, on the agent, you know, and how much they're prepared to do. But you are going to have to pay them for that effort, so you've got to work out whether it's worth your while getting an agent. And once you really get to a certain level, it probably is, because it takes a lot of work out of takes a lot of the work that you have to do. And also you might not like having to ring people up. A lot of people don't like trying to sell themselves, which I understand.
Yeah, you're sort of the salespeople of the industry, aren't
We're
you?
selling, you know, we can sort of say, oh, this band's great, whereas if you say, oh, I'm great, they're going to say, oh, are you? Yeah. Who says you're great? I do. Oh, well, yeah, okay. But, yeah, so an agent's probably in an easier position in a way to be contacting people. But also, it's got this bigger database. Because we might, like as an agency, we've got a lot of contacts, and I might have been dealing with a venue, and they might say to me, oh, have you got anybody that does this type of thing? And I think, oh yeah, okay, there's that artist. You know, they would be suitable for your venue. So people come to us and say, have you got an artist that would be available on these dates or this type of artist?
Because I guess actually, yeah, so when you're doing it yourself, we're kind of alluding to the terrible networking word, aren't we? In terms of getting booked, it's kind of a massive game of networking. It's you building a network of promoters who you get a personal relationship with, they like your music, they trust you, and then you use your network to get shows. But when you have an agent, suddenly you're getting access to this massive network that you would never be able to build. Because you've been doing, you know, you've been building a network for a very long time. So it is, you can initially start with your own network. I mean, that's how you can go out there and get bookings. But the reason at some point, well, there's various reasons why you want to bring an agent in at some point that you've talked through. But one of the reasons is you get access to that network that can be there. And I think certainly one reason people go for this is you might be sorted in your hometown because you know everybody in your hometown. But once you want to go national, certainly once you want to go international, suddenly you need a bigger network. And that's where I think an agent brings phenomenal value to the table.
Just a very quick question. As a basics understanding, when you're as an agency, how does it work? Do you have like a set number of clients? As an artist, is it usual to have just one booking agency?
Good question.
Or is it like different than?
Yeah. So how big's your roster, and are you an exclusive agent for the artists?
Okay, yeah. Well, my particular agency, I mean, we've got, I don't know, 70 or 80 artists on our roster, but we've got about 8 different agents. And each agent works with a certain set of musicians. And sometimes it's, you know, they like one of them is really into Americana, does a lot of Americana stuff. Somebody might be more into the folk, somebody more into the world. But as far as exclusivity goes, yeah, we prefer, well, we really like to work exclusively with an artist because it can get very complicated. If you've got more than one agent and all the agents are targeting the same people. It gets very complicated. You clashing, somebody's, well, obviously it's very complicated, and also you don't know then who's going to offer the same deals, or it might conflict with dates. So it's better if it's exclusive. And also I think it makes the agent feel more committed to that artist if they know they're the only one that's going to try and get them shows. If an agent feels that the artist got 2 or 3 other agents, they're going to feel less committed, and they're going to be more committed to the act that they know is just working with them. So I would go, try and get an exclusive deal really.
And agencies tend to will always have a bigger roster than, say, an office manager. They tend to have a slightly bigger roster. And actually, you benefit from that, because you alluded to earlier, as a new artist, the fact you're on a roster with some established artists is really valuable, because people are coming to you because they've desperately got to book your bigger artists, and that gives you the perfect opportunity to say, I'm working on this exciting new artist, are there in, particularly in the festival space, for example, that can be really valuable. I know you need to get off to another meeting, so I might say we'll have a round of applause for you, and then I'll come to you for the final question, if that's all right. Is that good? Yeah. So can we have a round of applause for... Also, so we're leaving some, so if you want to contact Chris, help us out with a card at the break, and all the info's on there. Thank you so much.
Hope to see you sometime.
I promised Chris that we would get to a 2 o'clock meeting, so I'm going to make sure that happens. But we've still got to ask your question in terms of, as I said at the start, one of the challenges in terms of getting booked, you want to know if people can get an audience in. How do I prove that if I've never done a show? And one of them is what I put on my own show. So if people are at that stage in your career where they're promoters, what sort of advice would you have for an artist who's also acting as a promoter?
So if you've not done it at all before, but you're considering it, it's worth just giving it a go. I suggest starting as small as possible, so the smallest possible venue that you think you could physically fit in. So in Manchester we've got places like the Castle and the Eagle, tiny little 80-capacity rooms. There are some smaller out there, but they're good venues. The venues will be quite receptive to you booking a show. They'll tell you how it all works. You probably need to pay a deposit to hire the venue. They'll possibly help you out with doing the ticketing or lead you to it. And then there are various considerations. There's things like doing the ticketing, so you probably need to be signed up with C-tickets or Dice or whatever it is, or multiple. Like I said, I use 5 different networks just to take advantage of there.
And I guess honestly, there are sort of the Eventbrite, a bit like with music distribution, there's the Eventbrites of this world that anybody can use. And I think Ticketmaster have their equivalent as well. So there are platforms that anybody can use. So you can pick one of those, but then the higher level C-tickets, higher level Ticketmaster, you're getting a bit more support from them. And they won't necessarily work with you on a DIY show.
Yeah, there's things like how well they rank in search engines. So I use C-tickets as my primary outlet because they're one of the best ones if you search for a particular artist. So they sell most of the tickets for most of my shows. So just literally get on with it. It's how I started. I had no aspirations to be a gig promoter. Then an artist that I was a big fan of was touring the UK but not play Manchester. And I just found an email for him, offered him £200, and that was 19 years ago, and I'm still doing it 19 years later. So it's as simple as that. That show sold out, so it gave me a full sense of optimism. Downhill, but we're back on the up now.
Is that why you called Hey Manchester?
Just needed a name.
In terms of, so I found a 60-cap venue, and am I paying the venue a fee usually? And are we talking 50 quid, are we talking 500 quid?
Yeah, if they don't know you, they'll definitely want to charge you a fee and want to take a deposit on that. That's normally half of the hire fee. So for, let's say, somewhere like the Castle in Manchester, 80 capacity, it's £170 to hire it, so they might ask you to pay £85 up front. Just so they know, they don't know if you're going to walk away or disappear or whatever. After that, it's up to you to promote it. So there's ticketing, there's booking the rest of the bill. So, booking artists you get on well with, and maybe some who are kind of related but you don't know so well, to kind of extend the general appeal of the show. Ways of promoting, like I said, online is the cheapest, easiest way of doing it. It means you can regularly be pushing your show over the coming weeks. consider print promo, so the most straightforward way that that is posters. So get a poster design, get it printed, you don't need to spend a load of money on it, and then you can either put it up yourself or I pay for a network of distribution where I give them 50 posters a show and they handle, there's like frames around the city and they handle all of that themselves.
Do you know if you're asking for
I think, they're called. I think.
Do you spend money with Instagram and Facebook? Is that a good use?
Yeah,
of your budget?
more and more. Over the years, it's become. I probably spend as much on Instagram and Facebook as I do on posters and flyers, which it didn't used to be a thing.
Yeah.
10 years ago, even 7 or 8 years ago. And now it's a big, major cost, and it's what artists and agents and managers are kind of keen on because they see it as well. Whereas posters around the city, you can send them photos, but they don't know if it's happening or not really.
I've got one question and then we'll ask your questions. When I do the venue and I pay them 150 quid or whatever, what am I getting from the venue? Am I literally getting an empty stage with no kit, or can I expect to get the PA, or is it that you have to have that conversation?
Yeah, most of the time, if it's a ready-made venue, then it'll come with the PA, the desk, the monitors, the mics, everything. It'll usually come with an engineer, the house engineer, but you need to check that. There's a new venue in the city where you pay an extra fee for the engineer's time. You pay them by the hour, so £50 an hour, as well as paying a small amount for the room. You can also expect them to list it on their social media and on their website. They might not push it too hard because they might have 50 shows at any one time. But when you announce the show or the day of the show, you can expect them to at least give it a push then. Yeah, you shouldn't rely on the venues to be your main marketing outlet, really.
Yeah.
Just going to ask about the digital and physical advertisement. Obviously with like digital you can track like how far it's reaching. Do you have a way of doing that with their physical posting?
It's much more difficult, obviously, just naturally. You can do things like having a QR code on it and track the use of the QR code, but again, you don't know if someone's used, you might have 100 people that see it and only 10% of those actually use the code. So it's much more difficult to track. And again, this is part of why agents and artists and managers kind of like the online thing, because you can say we've had a reach of 3,000 people and we've had 30 click-throughs. You can give them very specific stats.
Any other questions for Chris? Yes, Chris. Okay, I'm going to get Ellen up in a moment to talk about one of the shows that she did, so we get the artist effect on this. But before that, quick round of course, Chris, and then we'll swap. Okay, we just want to finish off the live section by just getting one of our artist entrepreneurs to give their perspective. And so I basically gave Ellen the task of picking a show that she had performed recently. For those of you who weren't here at the start, maybe remind us that actually as a featured artist putting out your own music on its current guise, that's relatively recent, but you've been in bands for a long time. So maybe just give us a little bit of a background of what your experience of the live world as a band member, and then we can get into this show with you as a sort of solo artist.
So I was in bands from being 18 up until presently. I was in a very large Afrobeat band doing festival circuits for about 5 or 6 years, and we did a lot of big festivals, and I was in some offshoots of some quite big Manchester bands, and we did some like European tours, went all around the UK, so have had quite a big hand in. I've done a lot of gigs, a lot of gigging, and I've learned a lot from doing that. But then I started writing my own music about 5 or 6 years ago, and booked this gig. And I'd been touring my own music but without having released any music, so I was kind of going off the back of my reputation as a singer with these other bands, and then kind of just wanted to do a headline show even though I'd not released any music. So this was in 2023, and booked myself.
So in essence, you were the promoter of the show.
Well, joint promotion between me, myself, and the venue.
Cool. So Sue Presents is you or the venue?
It was the venue.
That's the venue.
Yeah. But I approached them.
Yeah.
And I actually got the email chain up so I could remind myself of what it was, because they initially proposed a 50-50% ticket split with a £200 cap on So
let's do it. So this is the deal. So in essence, so you are the promoter and the artist of the show. So you're negotiating with the venue. So they were willing to do a 50-50 split. So all the money that comes into the box office, they get half, you get half.
Yeah.
Remind me what 200. Oh right. So what's the 200 cap?
£200 cap on my profits.
Right.
But so I was like, can we get rid of that cap because that seems ridiculous.
So you couldn't get more than £200 out of the box office.
Yeah, that's what they wanted. But
Yeah.
I ended up not earning more than that anyway. But I asked for that to not be a thing.
Yeah.
I had a £150 artist fee on top of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I ended up earning, how much was it? Like £370, I think. £328.29.
Cool.
And they covered the.
So that's a combination of so whatever happened on the night, you were going to get £150. So in essence, so the venue very much was. I mean, to be clear, if you just book a venue, the venue ain't going to be doing that. The venue just wants you to pay a venue hire fee. So this is very much the venue being a co-promoter. Now lots of venues are also promoters, but basically.
And I knew the promoters.
Yeah.
And I was friends with them.
Yeah.
And they know me.
But what's good for you is that now, because actually, you're spending money getting to the venue, you're spending money getting ready for the show, you're spending money on all of that, but you know at the very least you got 150 quid to play with.
And I brought my own sound engineer, and I had 3 band members in addition to me as well. So they kindly did it for a very reduced fee and curry.
But this is another really important point because when you get a fee from the promoter, what happens on stage is your responsibility.
Yeah.
So if you are a solo artist but you need other people on stage, that's your responsibility. So let's say you're getting £1,000 as a fee, you're playing a slightly bigger show, but you are a solo artist and you have 4 people behind you, you're paying them out of your £1,000. So it's always remembering that it's a fee to deliver the show. It's not necessarily profit. And remember, now the agent's left the room, the agent's fee's coming off that. And an agent will nearly always commission before anything else happens. Because remember, the money goes through the agent's bank account before it comes to your bank account. So the agent's taking their 10 to 15% and then passing on what's left to you. It's not that they're commissioning on the 40 quid profit that you made on the show. So that's really important. So although you were guaranteed 150 quid, you're spending some of that on the other manpower that you need to deliver the show.
Yeah, and like rehearsals and taxis, because I don't drive, you know.
Yeah.
All that stuff. Yeah, I actually have the spreadsheet up here. So their costs were £652.42. The revenue was £1,000.
So that's ticket sales.
Ticket sales, and so the overall profit was £368.58. We split that, and then I get my £150 on top.
Yeah. So your £100 was part of the cost of the show.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're presumably looking for a rental fee within the cost of the show.
Yeah.
And then there'll be other the engineers, or you come in engineers cost.
Well, they had another engineer there.
Yeah.
So I didn't pay for an engineer anyway, but it was fine.
Yeah.
It was for me, it was just, that show was about filling a room and playing my set with my band.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was very.
Without losing too much money.
Without losing too much
Which
money.
is why that bit's really important.
Yeah, it was quite a low risk gig for me.
Yeah.
And I was sold at 121 tickets, I think.
Yeah.
Which is, the room felt full. And, I worked my arse off promoting it. But they had like 2 A2 posters of that in the venue. There was posters like that all around.
And they paid for that.
They paid for that. They gave me like 100 posters. I was flyering.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I was doing all of it. I gave loads to my little friends, or like little gremlins walking around town giving it to people. So, and then the room was, I'd say the room was filled with 70% of people that I knew.
Yeah.
So all of these figures look good, but the fact it's a very much a homegrown show, and it's like it was. I think when you do play a hometown show, it's almost like a bit of a lie because your friends and family will be there. So I think when you do a show in another town, it's kind of it shows.
No, and I guess in the industry, those people in the industry who follow the data, when it comes to how many tickets you can sell for a show, we'd have hometown shows a different line on the spreadsheet versus a normal show. Because yes, we would expect in your hometown you're going to have more of a following, not to mention friends and family.
Yeah.
So here's my big question for you. Obviously, you've done all of these gigs as a member of a band, where you show up, you do the show, and then suddenly you do this show where you're now the promoter.
Yeah.
Okay, you've managed to get a co-promoter to take some of the risk away, but how did it compare, basically putting on your own show versus showing up and being part of a band?
Oh my gosh, so when I'm in other bands, I'm like swanning around, like, say I want a cup of tea, like, just literally like so chill, and then like the only thing you have to think about is the performance, which is a lot to think about. Sometimes I'm playing multiple instruments, sometimes the songs are quite difficult, sometimes we've got another show afterwards that we need to drive to, whatever. But I've not got anything, it's not on the, I've not got as much on the line like this. I'm making sure people are coming in, everyone's texting me, can I get a guest list? That like, I need to make sure everyone's eaten before a certain amount of time. I need to eat before the show because I get hunger, like you don't, I'm like the Incredible Hulk, it's awful. So all these things you need to sort, it becomes like a logistics thing when all you really want to be thinking about is the show.
You've got to get on stage and perform.
Yeah, but I think that's where agents come into it, that's where promoters come into it, so you can offload some of that responsibility.
Do you now think that when you're, whether it's your solo shows or indeed with bands, having done that, you now have a better understanding of what all these people around you are doing?
100%, and like when you have good ones, you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. And I don't know if anyone's ever toured in Europe, but when you tour in Europe, you get like, especially in France, you get like a 4-course meal, and you sit down with the promoter, and then you have dinner, and like it's like, oh my god, I'm like in heaven. And then in England, if you have a really nice promoter, sometimes that happens. Like there's some really nice venues in Manchester where you get sorted out, and there's a really nice venue in Newcastle that sort you out. But I think the culture is different here, and you've got to kind of find those promoters that you really trust and the people that you want to surround yourself with, to kind of mitigate for it, because it's going to be a stressful gig. And gigs are always stressful just because there's so much on the line. So you want to make sure that you're in a position to be able to perform to your best ability, really. So you want to kind of, it's like down to limitation, most of it.
I have a couple more questions. Was there any questions for Ellen about case study? Really nice.
So just about when you said like finding your promoters and your kind of crew that you trust and as well. Do you have any advice on how you did that? I mean, of course you were gigging for so long.
Yeah, I think,
if you weren't.
I don't know, I think I'm really lucky in that I had that experience because it kind of got me to I got to test the waters without putting like my career on the line in a way. But I just think a lot of musicians are quite emotionally intelligent people, and I think even on email chains you can tell, you know, and like the way people like present themselves and stuff. But I think a lot of the time people do have the best intentions, so you know, I think you can find out quite quickly. But yeah, it's kind of try it for you, but I think you can't really do it. So, but also word of mouth, so asking people who might know, like, oh, for recommendations and stuff like that. Asking promoters that you do trust, do you know this person? I think, you know, word of mouth is probably the most trustworthy source.
Yeah, also if you regularly go to a venue as a fan, is looking, well, who are the promoters in this venue?
Yeah.
And then just get changed to the bar staff.
Oh, so true. So true.
We're like, all the promoters who come in this venue.
Get them a tequila shot.
Any other questions? You brought up guest lists. I'm interested in your opinion on the big bag guest list. Is what point are people taking the piss and you need to take no? And I guess you as the artist promoter, you're around to act. And I guess with you, when you've got artist and management, and then suddenly the label saying, "Oh, we need 10 people." What is it? When is it acceptable to say, "Go away, you're not allowed on my guest list"?
Oh my gosh, all the time. It's your gig. Also, if you are a musician, you are, unless you have like you're like language entry or something, you're gonna be skinned. I'm skinned. We're all skinned. Do you know what I mean? It's like when someone asks for guest lists, they're taking money from you. Do you know what I mean? And like if they're also skinned, fair enough. Paid guest lists have changed my life. If you have a cheap list and it's like £5 cheaper than the ticket, people are so much more likely. Most people will buy a paid guest list. Do you know what I mean? And it's a really good way of getting your skin friends to your gigs. But if you've got someone asking on the day, like, oh, can I, you know, get a guest list or whatever, just say no. Do you know what I mean? I've started doing on some shows that I'm promoting myself. This was not a gig of mine. It was like I did like a Jeff Buckley Grace album all in full at the Talleyrand, and I did a tiered ticket system. So there was one that was Help the Artist, and it was 25 quid. 3 people bought those tickets, and it was more than like 20 people buying the mid-tier ticket. So you can, you know, if there's people that have money and they're willing to pay, tiered ticket systems are also a really good way of mitigating for guest lists and cheap lists.
What's your view as a promoter on the guest list?
Well, I assume a level of guests. It's normally up to 10% of the venue capacity, and you split that between the headliner and the support. So if it's a 250 cap venue, then the headliner.
So So you're up front saying you can have this many people
Yeah,
on the guest list.
I pre-agree it. It's quite often in the contracts. It's factored in. With the supports, if it's a local support, I'll give them the free guest list, but then offer a cheap list
Yeah,
as well. The only slight headache is when a show's sold out and then you've got everyone then wanting guest lists.
Because then it's like a fire risk as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So again, I kind of preset that limit of 10% normally.
I guess on our side, where we're asking for this, I guess, particularly if it's a seated venue, we get it, it's full. But I guess there's always that thing of, you could always squeeze one person in at the back, surely. And of course, every venue has a capacity, that clearly isn't true.
I have a different take on guest lists. So I'm on the venue side, I'm a talent buyer, and I always resent performers who do not submit a guest list. So you're talking about situations where, a lot of people are coming to the show.
To bring in
Exactly,
guests.
so it's the other way around for venues, because, we make our money on selling Heineken, right?
Yeah.
So we want bodies there. So I really would like the artists to use their guest list. And if they submit no guest list, that means they have done zero work to promote the show. And I think you used the word, it's a joint venture.
Yeah.
Actually, that is so true. And in fact, it's more on the artist side that they should promote, because nobody wants to perform.
My guest list is always full, don't get me wrong. but I mean...
So that's a good problem to have. Same on the other side.
Yeah.
Make sure that you use your guest list, because it doesn't look good when you do not submit.
So Chris is giving you 20 places, it's really use those 20 places.
Although I work with a lot of touring artists, so if you're coming over from Canada, then I don't expect you to have 20 friends in Manchester who want to come to the show. Quite often I'll get quite big shows where there's 2 guests for like a 300, 400 cap venue. It's just because they don't know that many people in the city, but locally people almost always do use their allocations.
And I'm guessing there's like a little bit of transparency there, like if you sold out a show and the artist only used 2 of their 20, you would like take spots off the guest list and then sell those tickets?
Potentially, it depends on the venue, whether it's seated and that kind of thing, really.
Timing wise as well, it might be difficult if the tickets go off sale at 6 p.m. that day. You don't know about the guest list until an hour after that.
Sometimes you can sell, or have the option to
I guess
on the door.
if it's a big sellout show and you can claw them back.
And you'll announce that as well. You
Yeah.
find out at 6 o'clock, you go, we've had some production releases,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, and first 10 people on the door can buy tickets. Normally it's too late at that point.
One last thing, and then we'll take another break. Sorry to pull everything back to copyright, but did you get PRS from this show?
I did.
So, and that's in addition to your 150 quid.
Yeah.
So remember that. So, assuming
Even though I haven't released the songs.
Even though you haven't released, you don't have to release a song. The copyright exists. It is being performed. It exists. So, assuming you're performing your own songs, a license is required, and it is generally the responsibility of either the promoter or the venue to get that license. It generally depends on the scale of the show. The general rule with organisations like PRS and their counterparts around the world is if they can avoid making it the artist's problem, they will. So they look for anybody else that they can make it so it's the venue's problem, it's the promoter's problem. Now, if you're the artist and you, I don't know, do a show in a car park, there's no one else I can go after. So I'd have to come to the artist and say, we need to do a license here. Okay, you might say, well, I'm performing my own songs. Actually, PRS would probably say that doesn't matter, it still needs to go through the system. But more importantly, yes, you're performing your own songs, but maybe you do a couple of cover versions. Maybe there's a few songs where you have a co-writer who's not on stage. So even though you're performing your own songs, usually you'd have to get a PRS license. But if it's a venue or promoter, it's the venue or promoter's problem. And in the UK, it varies slightly depending on the show, but the standard with a ticketed gig is that 4%, maybe slightly more, but let's stick with 4% for easy maths. 4% of the box office basically goes to PRS. So whatever comes into the box office, 4% gets paid to PRS, and then PRS's job is to then pay all the writers whose songs were performed over the show. So it's sort of split between all of the writers. PRS have their own rules about how it gets split. Then there's a massive data thing of how the hell does PRS know? So the promoter, you pay PRS 400 quid, 4% of the box office, you send that off to PRS. As a promoter, you're now suspicious that PRS basically banked that because have you seen their offices and their Glastonbury backstage suite? Somebody's paying for that. So what's happening to that £400? In theory, what's happening to that £400 is PRS charges an admin fee. I think it's about 10% online, I can't remember, it'll be around 10%. And the rest is meant to go to the writers. Or if they're published, half the money will go to the writer and half the money will go to the publisher. But this is another data thing. That can only happen if PRS knows what songs were performed and who wrote those songs. So therefore, to get paid, you've got to make sure every song is in the system as soon as it's written, with everybody's splits set out. If there aren't 100% allocated, then payments won't happen. If you have 60%, it screws up the system, so your splits add up to 60. If your splits add up to 150, even worse. So make sure it's in the system up to 100%. That's data task number 1. Data task number 2 is you then need to go to PRS and say, I did a show, my own songs, this was the date, this was my set list, and then they can make sure that you get paid. And if we're being honest, they kind of take it on trust. If you're a PRS member and you say, I did a gig in Manchester with Chris on this date, this is my set list, put it into the system, and then things will happen behind the scenes, and then at some point later in the year, you get your cut of that money. And for some artists, and this is particularly true if you play festivals, because actually PRS on a festival, even if you're quite low down the bill, can be pretty good money. Meanwhile, the fees at a festival, if you're pretty low down the gig, are not good money. So it may well be, actually the PRS money is way more than the fee. So it's making sure, assuming you're doing your own songs, that you get that money, because that is what might allow you to make a profit. Okay, we've got some copyright questions and then we'll take a break. So you had your hands up first.
How would this work in terms of traditional music? If
Well, so here's the question. Good copyright question. So, are you just performing the traditional as they were originally performed, or are you adapting them and changing them into your own versions?
they'd be arranged.
Okay, so basically, if you take an old work and you rearrange it, you create a new copyright.
Okay.
Now, if the work you're rearranging is already in copyright, so like if you were to take one of Ellen's songs and to rework it, you'd need to get Ellen's permission to do that. But you asked about traditional music. If you're taking what we call a public domain work, so that's a work that is old enough that there is no copyright in it, because copyright expires eventually, and some folk music is so old, copyright hasn't been invented. So if you're taking a piece of traditional music that is public domain, therefore not in copyright, and then you are rearranging it, you're creating a new copyright in your version. And you can log that with PRS, and every time you perform it, you're due to be paid. And indeed, if I was to take your version and perform it, you would be due to be paid. Now, we can get into a debate of how much rearranging do you need to do to say a new copyright has been created, and copyright law doesn't really tell us. So, if it's a really slight rearrangement, probably the argument would be, well, really that's not a rearrangement, so it's public domain, therefore there's no copyright, you don't get paid, nobody gets paid. But if it is, if your version is distinct from the original, there will be a new copyright in it.
I guess another, similar kind of question is, because a lot of folk repertoire is written as well. So you might be playing a tune that's been written by someone however many years ago. How would that work in terms of PRS?
If you're performing somebody else's work that is in copyright, so not a really old public domain work, this PRS money is theirs, not yours. Now, how the hell PRS pays them is a whole other story, but it's not your problem.
Yeah.
Providing the venue or the promoter has a PRS license, the money goes to PRS, and then it's up to PRS to figure out how they pay whoever owns the copyright in that piece of music. And that's true for if ever you perform a song that is not yours, that is still in copyright, royalties are due, and it's PRS's problem to figure out how to pay them.
Right.
Now, whether or not they do is a whole other story, but in theory, that's what's meant to happen. Okay, let's very, very quickly do some quick fire questions, then we'll take a break.
Sorry, just off the back of that, do you have, how would you recommend getting the permission of the artists whose copyright is still in copyright?
For a live performance, you don't need to.
For a recorded thing?
Oh, for recording, depends how you're releasing it.
Okay.
Generally speaking, you don't need to.
Okay.
So if you were doing a physical release, CD or vinyl, even if that's just to sell at the merch stall, you would need to get an MCPS license. We talked about MCPS earlier, and that would cover it. If you're releasing it to Spotify and Apple and iTunes, etc., they have licenses. So you're covered by their licenses.
Okay.
So as I said before, the music industry wants to make it not the artist's problem. So if at all possible we find somebody else, it is the venue's problem, it's Spotify's problem, it's the BBC's problem. But if you are pressing up CD and vinyl, it has to be your problem. The good news is MCPS is single license.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a cover on my album. It's an arrangement, but the copyright still exists. And I emailed the guy. I accidentally started making a new PRS for it, And he was like, you need to delete that
Yeah.
now. And then I used their ISWC on the DSP pitch and my own iOS.
Yeah. But crucially, you don't need permission from that artist because Spotify will make sure they get paid.
Okay.
In theory. Okay, quick questions.
The PRS has inspectors, or how
How do they know?
do they
So they rely on artists self-reporting. There are various things they do. So they do what we call a sweep. So they will have people who occasionally go to shows. They're more proactive at festivals, actually, if we're being honest. I think generally with venues, what they might do is some research where they say that's a rock venue, that's a jazz venue, that's a folk venue. So when money comes in from those venues we don't know what to do with, we're going to use that information to skew where the payments goes. With dance music, they have been investing in little gadgets in the venue, in the club venues, that listens to the music, like Shazam. And there's a company called Ordo that are trying to get that much more established. So it could be in 10 years' time, every venue has a little listening device, and it all suddenly starts to get tracked. Now, the Shazam tape technology is really good for spotting recordings, but if you do a metal version of a jazz standard, it probably isn't going to spot it. So on the song side, it's not quite as good yet. But that is something that they are looking into. Last question, and then we'll take a break.
If abstract locations,
Yeah.
car parks, and unlicensed venues, what's the process as an artist there?
So if you're putting on your own show in a random place, in theory, you are the promoter and you need to get a PRS license. So you go to the PRS website as a customer rather than as a rights owner, and you look for whatever the most relevant license is.
And when you do a gig and then you come into PRS and then you can't find them on the system, is there anything you can do?
Oh, you played the gig, you can't find them on the system. I mean, I guess well, the question is that a data error or are they unlicensed? If it's a data error, there's probably something you can do, phone them up, say, maybe it's just that something went wrong with the data thing. If you played an unlicensed venue, you've played an unlicensed venue. And there's no money. And PRS would say you shouldn't play that venue.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you really like that venue, and you go to PRS and you moan about it, there's a risk PRS will sue them. So, and they do. PRS will have a number of lawsuits in action at any time. So if it's a venue you really love, that you know is operating under the radar, I can only say this because PRS aren't in the room, I wouldn't be telling PRS about it. Because they might be getting a stern legal letter at some point. Okay, one last question and then we'll break. Oh, go on.
So can you, like say if you play at a venue regularly you're not sure if they have a PRS license, should you ask them or are you saying it's not worth having that?
I would say if they're an established gig venue in the UK,
Yeah.
the chances of them not having a PRS license are quite low.
What if they're a bar?
If they're a bar,
Kind of a venue, kind of a bar.
it used to be that they gave stickers and everyone was going to put stickers on the door.
Yeah.
So do check the door because they might have a sticker and then that will up. It means, well, the sticker tells you at some point they had a license. They currently have a license. I guess, you could ask PRS and PPL, do they have a, well, you could ask the venue, do you have a license? Maybe they'll give you an honest answer. Maybe they'll lie. What's more likely to happen is they'll say, what's PRS? But I guess if they say what's PRS, maybe that's the answer you're going to, that means no. Because if they're paying PRS, they'll know, because they'll moan about it.
Sure.
Okay, one last question.
So when you upload your set list, does the publisher have to do it and yourself?
One or the other.
So it's just one
Yeah.
set list?
Yeah. So if you've got a publisher who can do it for you, great, you don't have to do the admin. But if you've got unpublished, then obviously you have to do it. Even if you've got a publisher, it's worth checking they're doing it.
Yeah.
Because some publishers are really on that, and some publishers are quite slack. So yeah.
You can backdate to 3 years as well.
Yeah.
Only on major performances though. Only on
Yeah.
festivals and major performances.
Yeah.
You can't back, it's only 1 year.
For
small
small.
They're currently discussing if you forgot to get paid 2 years ago, can you go back and claim now? And all societies have their own rules on how far you can claim back. So you need to go to society. And so PPL's rules are different to PRS's rules, to PPL's rules of how far you can claim back. And you can only claim back if you were a member at the point of time the music was used. If you were not a member at that time, so today, as a new member at PRS,